Hi, hello, this is Malice, and welcome back to our channel. For those who have never had the pleasure of eating Korean pizza, I have one word for you: corn. That'll make more sense in a moment. If at this point you're wondering why this channel is putting out yet another beret tutorial, I thought a beret was really the best way to capture my ode to this strange and delicious oddity. Korean pizza is kind of polarizing. Some people think it's a reinvention of a classic, while others find it to be nothing short of sacrilegious. There's plenty of variety among Korean pizzas, but I'd say potato pizza is the least offensive, which is why I chose it. Also, personally, I think any dish could be improved by adding potato, but maybe that's just me. Next, we'll use these two pink colors to make our bacon bits. My plan is to cut the main squares out of this dark magenta and then add in the little fat squiggles in the light pink. After the bacon bits, we'll use this dark green for the green pepper. Now, usually potato pizza doesn't actually have green pepper, but I like green pepper. Then I'll use this duller brown to make some mushrooms. And last but certainly not least, we can't forget the corn. I decided not to add an extra layer of cheese beneath because the base of the beret is this nice golden brown color. It's close enough to the color of baked cheese that I think I can get away with it. So keep in mind, under all these toppings will be one layer of golden brown felt. So I'm starting out with this golden crust. I want the diameter of it to be roughly the same as the top part of the beret. Now, I haven't actually assembled the beret yet, but this is the top part that I cut out. So we know we don't want it to be any bigger than this, so I'll go ahead and trace this diameter. Leaves us with this shape. Now, accounting for the seam allowance, we'll actually probably want it to be a little bit smaller than this, so I'll go ahead and mark that line. And now we need to make that wavy interior line that should match about what a bubbled crust looks like. Looks about right. Looking pretty crusty. So I thought about the possibility of instead making the crust a little bit larger and then sewing it into the seam of the beret, kind of like piping. But in the end, I decided that was a little bit too dramatic for what I was going for. But definitely I think that would be a style to try if you wanted to. So trying to make this shape as true to the original circle as possible, because of course it's felt, so it's stretching, which adds a little bit of an extra complication. Okay, so the shape we're going for here is the tomato sauce that peeks out from under the cheese just before the crust. So I think the cheese ends up melting in a slightly more circular way. So I think our inner line should be not quite a true circle, but something close. And I think it makes most sense to have this tomato sauce piece extend under this crust piece, and then we'll glue it all together. So I'm just gonna make some marks so I know about how wide to make the outer circle. My original plan was to use this fabric glue, but the felt ended up soaking it up like sponge cake, so I'd recommend just using hot glue from the start. I know that the other option is that you can sew the pieces on by hand, or even you can use your machine, but I didn't want any visible stitching on the outside of mine, and honestly, I was just too lazy. So I'm going to go ahead and let this part dry and start cutting out the other toppings. Next up are the potato wedges, which give this pizza its name. This is the only 3D topping, so unfortunately it's also the most complicated part to make. It was a little difficult for me at first to conceptualize what 2D shape to draft so it could be folded up into the 3D shape that I wanted. But after much trial and error, I ended up with this fat lemon shape out of the yellow felt and a skinny lemon shape out of the brown felt. Rather than using glue, I decided to stitch the potato wedges together. My original plan was to turn the pieces inside out and to stuff them, but I ended up skipping that step, and you'll see why. Before I was finished sewing up the potato wedges, I added a few strategic stitches inside to make that edge a little bit crisper. As you can see, the wedges don't really need any stuffing to keep their shape. As I said before, to make the bacon bits, I cut the larger shape out of the dark pink, and then the fat squiggles out of the light pink. I then glued the light pink bits onto the dark pink base, and voila, bacon. For the green pepper, I experimented a bit with larger pieces that had flatter curves, or smaller pieces that had more distinct arches, though both look a bit the way I feel like everyone drew birds in the 4th grade art class. I ended up choosing the smaller version even though they look less realistic, because I felt like they added more stylistically. It was at this point that I started getting Memphis group vibes, which, even if you've never heard the name, is definitely a style you'd recognize. They pretty much define what we today think of as being 80s style. Think 80s bowling alley carpet. And it ended up inspiring the shredded cheese that I added later. Now it comes down to the most controversial topping, the corn. Corn shows up in many places in Korean food that you might not expect, and depending on your personal taste, you might not be pleased to see it. Since I personally am on peaceable terms with corn, I added as much as I could to my beret, if just to add to the realism. Are you ready to see the final version? Niw and I went to Pizza Express in Sinsa to film the reveal shots. The place had a very 90s pizza shop vibe. It made me nostalgic for birthday parties and pizza places when I was a kid. We got a half and half pepperoni and cheese, some fries, and drinks. It had the perfect amount of grease and a nice tangy sauce, which I find is hard to come by in Korea. Ironically, this was very American style, not a corn kernel in sight. If you're looking for a more authentic American style pizza, something very unlike the kind I modeled my beret off of, I definitely recommend Pizza Express. So there's my Korean pizza beret. If you try making this or any other variety of pizza berets, or if you have any questions, let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe.